Sign it, my brother said, sliding the document across the table like it meant nothing. Or, I'll have you removed. I looked down at the paper, then at him, then at my daughter sitting in the hallway, 7 years old, still wearing the black dress from our mother's funeral 3 hours ago. She's right there, I said quietly. He didn't even glance at her. Sign it, Claire. My mother had been buried that morning. The flowers on her grave were still fresh. And my brother was already standing in her kitchen, in her house, with a notarized document that said everything she owned now belonged to him. The house, the savings, the small investment account she'd spent 30 years building, all of it, gone. With a signature I didn't recognize at the bottom of a will dated 6 weeks before she died. 6 weeks before she died, my mother had been in the ICU. She hadn't been able to hold a pen. I didn't sign anything that day. I picked up my daughter, carried her to my car, and drove to the only motel I could afford on short notice. Maya fell asleep in my arms, asking why we couldn't sleep in Grandma's house anymore. I told her we'd figure it out. I told her everything was going to be okay. I didn't cry until she was asleep. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 29 years old. And the week my mother died was the week I learned that the people you trust the most can hurt you in ways that leave marks you carry for the rest of your life. It was also the week I learned I could hit back. My brother and I had never been close, not really. He was 6 years older, already out of the house by the time I was 12. He called on birthdays if he remembered. He showed up at Christmas with expensive wine and quiet contempt for the life I'd built. He'd married a woman who measured every room she walked into and found everyone in it slightly beneath her. They lived 40 minutes away and visited twice a year. My mother and I were different. I was the one who drove her to chemo. I was the one who slept on the hospital couch when her blood pressure dropped. I was the one who held her hand when the doctor said comfortable care only and watched her face crumple and then go still. My brother showed up on the last day. He stood in the doorway for 40 minutes. He didn't hold her hand. So when the attorney read her actual will, the one on file, the one she'd signed 2 years ago with her lawyer present, and it said the house went to both of us equally, split down the middle, I thought that was the end of it. I thought we'd sell, divide, move on. Grief was already doing enough damage. I didn't need a war on top of it. Then my brother produced the other will. His attorney presented it 4 days after the funeral. New document, new date, new signature, new terms. Everything to him. A single line about a small cash gift to me. Just enough to look considered. The attorney was careful, calm, efficient. My brother sat across from me at the table with his hands folded like a man who had already won. Maybe he thought I'd fold. Maybe he thought grief had softened me enough that I'd look at that document and just let it happen. Maybe he thought I was the same girl who used to cry in her room when he took things from her. I wasn't. I'll need time to review this, I said. He blinked. That was clearly not the response he'd prepared for. There's nothing to review. It supersedes the prior will. I understand what you're saying. I'll need time. His wife touched his arm. He straightened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Claire. Mom wanted this. I looked at him for a long moment. Then, you won't mind if I take a few days. I left. I didn't let him see my hands shaking. That night, Maya was doing homework at the motel table, humming to herself, completely unaware that the floor had dropped out from under us. She looked up and asked if we could get pancakes in the morning. I said yes. I watched her go back to her coloring book. The red marks on my receipt swam in front of my eyes. 2 weeks of motel. My savings. The security deposit I'd been hoping to use for a real apartment. Mom, she said without looking up, is everything okay? Yeah, baby, I said. Mommy's just thinking. She nodded, satisfied. 7 years old, and she trusted me completely. That was the moment I stopped being sad. I spent the next morning on the phone. I called the attorney who had drafted my mother's original will, a quiet man named Gerald Hess, who had known my mother for 20 years. I asked him one careful question. Had he been contacted about any amendment or update to her will in the last 6 months of her life? There was a pause. No, he said, I was not. I asked him if that was unusual. Another pause. Longer. It would be highly unusual, yes. She never mentioned changing anything. She was quite clear about her wishes. I thanked him. I hung up. I sat in the motel parking lot for 4 minutes. Then I started writing things down. The document my brother had produced listed a notary named Patricia Wilder from a firm in Clarkfield, 40 miles away. Not the firm my mother had used for 30 years. Not anyone she had ever mentioned. I searched Patricia Wilder's license, current, clean record. But her firm had only opened 18 months ago. My mother's signature on the new will was dated 14 months ago, 2 months after she'd been diagnosed with late-stage ovarian cancer, 6 weeks before her first hospitalization. I pulled her hospital records, the ones I had access to, as her emergency contact. On the date of that signature, my mother had been at a specialist appointment 3 states away. I had driven her. I had the gas receipts. I had the appointment confirmation in her email, which she'd given me access to years ago when her eyesight started going. She had not been in Clarkfield. She had not met with Patricia Wilder. She had not signed anything. My brother had forged our mother's will. I sat with that knowledge for 2 full days before I did anything. Not because I was unsure, because I needed to be careful. Because if I moved too fast and got it wrong, he would bury the evidence and I would lose everything. I had a 7-year-old daughter in a motel room. I had no margin for error. On the 3rd day, I called my father. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. He had stood next to my brother when the second will was presented. He hadn't said anything. He had looked at the floor. I had told myself he didn't know. I had held on to that. "Dad," I said when he picked up, "did you know about the second will?" Silence. "Dad." "Claire." His voice was tired, old, careful. "Your brother," he explained it to me. He said, "Your mother had concerns about how you'd manage." "Stop," I said. "She was in another state on the date that will was signed. I have documentation." More silence. Your brother said. "I'm not asking what my brother said. I'm asking if you knew that will was forged." The longest silence. Then, "Don't make this a bigger thing than it needs to be." I hung up. I sat in the parking lot again. The sky was gray. A man was walking his dog past the motel entrance. Maya was inside watching cartoons. Everything felt very still and very far away. My father knew. Or he suspected. Or he chose not to look. I wasn't sure which was worse. I called an attorney. Her name was Sandra Okafor. A friend of a friend had given me her number 2 years ago after a landlord dispute. I'd never used it. I found it in an old email and dialed before I could think too hard. She answered on the 3rd ring and listened to me for 11 minutes without interrupting. "What you're describing," she said when I finished, "is will fraud, potentially involving forgery, a false notarization, and depending on how the notary was involved, conspiracy." "I know," I said. "Do you have the documentation you mentioned? The hospital records? The appointment confirmation? The gas receipts? Everything." "I have everything." She was quiet for a moment. "Where are you staying right now?" "A motel." Another brief silence. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring everything." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Because I was finally, for the first time since my mother died, thinking clearly. The grief hadn't gone anywhere. It was still there, sitting in my chest like something heavy and permanent. But underneath it, something else had taken shape. Cold. Certain. Patient. My brother had made one mistake. He'd assumed I would do what I had always done. Accept what I was handed. Take what was left. Stay quiet. Sandra met me at 9 in the morning. She had a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee she didn't touch. I laid the documents on her desk, one at a time. The original will. The appointment confirmation from 14 months ago. The gas receipts from the drive. My mother's email record showing the specialist visit. The hospital intake form, time-stamped, from the same date. Sandra looked through everything twice. "The notary is the weak link," she said. "If we can prove your mother wasn't in Clarkfield, and we can establish that Patricia Wilder either falsified her notarization or had no contact with your mother at all, the will collapses." "How long does that take? To file the challenge?" "A few weeks. To get a hearing?" "Depends on the court, but if what you're showing me holds up," she tapped the appointment confirmation, "this is not complicated. This is a clear, demonstrable timeline." "What about criminal charges?" She looked at me carefully. That would be a matter for the district attorney, not a civil court. They'd open their own investigation. That can happen simultaneously, but you'd need to file a complaint. I want to do both, I said. She nodded slowly. Then we do both. I walked out of her office into the gray October morning and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Maya was at school. I had 3 hours before pickup at a motel bill was overdue. My brother was probably right now sitting in my mother's kitchen, drinking her coffee, in her favorite chair, not for much longer. I spent the next week feeding Sandra documents from my mother's email account, her bank statements from the last 2 years, her calendar, her medical records. My mother had been meticulous. She'd kept everything. Every receipt, every appointment, every phone call logged in a little planner she bought at the drugstore every January. And then I found something I hadn't been looking for. In her email from 8 months ago, there was a message she'd drafted but never sent. It was addressed to Gerald Hess, her original attorney. The subject line was blank. The body read, "I need to talk to you about something my son asked me to sign. I'm not sure I understand it. Can we meet this week?" She had never sent it. Maybe she'd been afraid. Maybe she'd talked herself out of it. Maybe my brother had gotten there first. I forwarded it to Sandra. Then I sat at the motel desk for a long time, thinking about my mother drafting that email, and choosing not to send it, and why. I thought about all the ways women in my family had chosen quiet over conflict. All the ways we had swallowed things. All the ways we had told ourselves it wasn't worth the trouble. Maya came home from school and found me still sitting at the desk. "Mom," she said, dropping her backpack. "Did something happen?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "Come here." She climbed into my lap even though she was probably too old for it. I held her for a while. She smelled like school lunch and kid shampoo. "Are we going to get our own house again?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "We are." She seemed satisfied with that. She slid off my lap and went to find her homework. 4 days later, Sandra filed the will contest. The same morning, I filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. I attached every document I had. I was careful and clear and thorough. I listed everything in chronological order. I did not editorialize. I did not make accusations beyond what the paper trail already said. The paper trail said plenty. The following Thursday, my brother called. His voice was different. Tighter. The confidence was still there, but it had a crack running through it. "I heard you filed something," he said. "Mm-hmm. Claire," he paused. "This is going to hurt the whole family." I didn't say anything. "You know what this will do to Dad? To the family name? You want to drag us all through this?" "I want my daughter to have a home," I said. "You're being dramatic. I was going to give you—" "You forged her signature," I said. "She was 4 hours away on the date that will was signed." "I have the documentation. The district attorney has the documentation. Your notary has already been contacted." Silence. "Don't do this," he said. And for the first time underneath the command, there was something smaller, something that sounded almost like fear. "You did this," I said quietly. "The day you stood at Mom's kitchen table with a document she never signed." I hung up. My hands didn't shake this time. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Patricia Wilder, the notary, was interviewed within a week. She had been hired through a third-party service, told she was notarizing a routine estate document, paid in cash, and shown a woman she was told was the signatory. She had not personally verified identity beyond a photocopy of an ID that investigators later determined was fabricated. She cooperated fully. The will was formally invalidated 6 weeks after Sandra filed the contest. The original will, my mother's real will, was reinstated. The house, split equally. The savings, split equally. The investment account, split equally. Exactly what my mother had intended. 2 weeks after that, my brother was charged with will fraud, forgery, and fraudulent notarization. His wife, investigators found, had helped source the notary and arrange the transaction. She was charged as well. My father called the morning the charges were filed. He was crying. Not the quiet kind of crying. The loud, ragged kind that doesn't care how it sounds. "She was your mother too," he said. And I didn't know if he meant that as an accusation or an apology or just something he needed to say out loud. "I know," I said. "He told me she wanted it that way." That she told him privately. I thought he stopped. I should have asked more questions. Yes, I said. You should have. He was quiet for a long time. What happens now? The legal process happens. I can't control that. And us? I looked out the motel window at the parking lot. At the ordinary Tuesday morning of it. A woman loading groceries into her car. A kid on a bike. The same gray sky. I don't know yet, Dad, I said honestly. I don't know. The trial was scheduled for March. My brother took a plea agreement in February. 3 years, with the possibility of parole at 18 months. His wife received 2 years probation and a permanent bar from serving as a financial representative for any estate. Patricia Wilder, for her cooperation, received a suspended sentence and the loss of her notary license. I was in the grocery store when Sandra called to tell me. Maya was next to me, carefully choosing a box of cereal based on which cartoon character was on the front. It's done, Sandra said. You don't have to testify. I stood in the cereal aisle and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 4 months. Okay, I said. Claire, she said, you did everything right. I thanked her. I hung up. Maya held up 2 cereal boxes. Which one has more marshmallows? She asked. I pointed to the one on the left. She put it in the cart with great satisfaction and moved on to the next aisle. We moved into the house 8 weeks later. It needed work. The gutters were clogged and one of the kitchen light fixtures buzzed and the backyard had gone to weeds. But it was my mother's house. The walls still smelled faintly like her. Her handwriting was still on the labels inside the kitchen cabinets, organizing things the way she had for 30 years. Maya ran from room to room on the first morning, louder than I'd ever let her be in the motel. She claimed the room with the window seat. She asked if she could paint it yellow. I said yes. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table going through the last of the paperwork. Outside, the light was going gold through the backyard. Maya was somewhere in the house, still exploring, humming to herself. I found, tucked into the back of a kitchen drawer, one of my mother's drugstore planners. This one from 2 years ago. I opened it carefully. She had written, in her small, precise handwriting, in the margin of an ordinary Wednesday, Claire will figure it out. She always does. I closed the planner. I didn't cry. I wasn't sad. I felt something more complicated than sad, something that had grief in it and love in it and the particular peace of knowing someone saw you clearly, even when you couldn't see yourself. Mom, Maya called from somewhere down the hall. Come look at this. I put the planner back in the drawer. I pushed back my chair. I walked toward her voice. The house was ours, not because someone gave it to us, because I had refused to let it be taken. There's a version of this story where I sign that document in the kitchen, 4 hours after my mother's funeral, and spend the next decade renting and moving and explaining to my daughter why we don't have a stable place to land. I've thought about that version. I know exactly how it would have gone. I chose a different one. My brother thought silence was compliance. He thought grief made people pliable. He thought that because I had always been the quiet one, the careful one, the one who kept the peace, that I would keep it now. What he didn't understand about quiet people is that we are not quiet because we have nothing to say. We're quiet because we're waiting for the right moment. Maya found an old photo album in the hall closet. She brought it to me that evening, climbing into my lap on the couch and opening it across both our knees. My mother young, my mother laughing, my mother holding a baby that I slowly recognized as me. She looks happy, Maya said. She was, I said. She looks like you. I looked at the photo for a long time. My mother's eyes, her expression. The particular way she held her chin when something pleased her. Yeah, I said. She does. Maya turned the page. We sat there in the yellow kitchen light, in my mother's house, and went through the whole album from beginning to end. Outside the window, the neighborhood went quiet and dark. The gutters still needed work. The backyard was still full of weeds. It didn't matter. We were home.